and we're recording, and we're full screen. So this is just the nerdiest thing. When I'm at work, I'll teach people SolidWorks, 3D modeling software, and when we're done with our case studies and lessons and stuff, when we're talking through this whole thing, we'll give them exercise time. I'll give them exercise time, which is they get to romp and roam and practice what they've learned, kind of thing. And if I don't put music on, it's just blank noise. Nobody talks. Nobody seems to do anything, unless they're all coworkers already. So today, you mentioned Guts, which is a character name from the anime Berserk, and Rock, or manga and anime. And I'm not the biggest fan of Rock, but there's some stuff that I like Pussifer, or in this case, something from Berserk. And I've been slowly sneaking in really nerdy shit for them to listen to, and nobody's batted an eyelash. They'll listen to.
Nobody said anything.
Yeah, video game music, soundtracks from movies, and now anime.
I used to play a lot of Japanese RPGs when I was younger. I mean, I still appreciate it because it's part of, let's just say nostalgia is a hell of a drug. So you never really forget those kinds of things. Those stories end up being dear to you. But yeah, a lot of video game music is really good. Guts, that is the most messed up, 15 minutes of video that I think I've ever watched, that was animated.
Okay, did you watch the Eclipse, or what did you?
Yeah,
what did you watch?
Somebody had sent. Was it Troll Wang? T-Roll Wang.
T-Roll?
He posted up some. He T-rolled me. He. It was actually pretty cool, but I was like, wow, man, that's pretty messed up. I don't recommend that people watch Berserk, but.
I recommend
unless you're really into some messed up stuff. Yeah, okay.
So the funny thing is, the misleading thing there is, I guess you could call it misleading. That's part of the story where it's called the Golden Age arc, where if you were to watch that anime, you would effectively see it as, this is medieval kind of fantasy. There's not a whole lot of fantasy at all. There's just people with swords and wanting to be king. There's no monsters. Oh, okay. A few episodes in, there's a little bit of monsters, but it's nothing. And then the last episode, maybe 2 or 3 episodes after a whole season of maybe about 25 episodes, shit goes down so hard. And like you said, the 15 minutes, that's if it's the scenes that I'm thinking of, you saw the 15 minutes. Everything else is why is this not PG-13 maybe? They threw in a few swear words. Oh god, yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, because they probably had to rate the whole thing mature. Just for that little bit at the end. Well, I didn't know that it was that far into the first season, but I guess we're speaking the way we are in case someone wants to watch it.
Yeah.
There's no spoilers. Yeah.
And it really is just good. It's a really good, harsh, dark story, and it's just purely humanity and stubbornness. The theme of the shows in the manga, as far as I can tell, is you don't have a choice except for to struggle as hard as you can, when you get to these really bad situations in life where it's fucking I give up, done, suicide doesn't sound like a bad way out,
right?
Just take me now. And then it's this is no, you keep fighting. Never stop fighting. You work with the cards that you're dealt, and you just do your damnedest.
It's definitely very Nietzschean.
I suppose so.
There's a very, very strong existentialist underlying theme to. I didn't watch the whole series, but I just read some cliff notes about it, and
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely inspired by existential philosophy to a huge degree because, I mean, well, and actually most dark stories really are. Which is why people resonate with dark stories even though they find them very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of, I mean, we're kind of learning this today. We're still running the experiment, right? But a lot of people thought that, certain movies wouldn't be very well received because they had really mature themes, and then they actually do better at the box office than people thought, even though they're very, somewhat deeper, more mature themes involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing to think about because Jordan Peterson actually just said recently regarding this whole phenomena where they're filling up stadiums, where him and Harris and now, Weinstein was moderating and Murray's been involved in the conversation. I haven't listened to the audio of those two last ones, but people are sitting there for 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah.
2.5 hours to sit there, and then the crowd doesn't even do a Q&A. They just want to hear these two intellectual beasts keep, going at it. They don't even want to ask questions. It's like, wow, people are actually smarter than we thought they were.
They were even given the option. Do you want to do Q&A? And they're like, no, we want to see you just keep on boxing this thing out with your brains. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why and why would you stop if you're having such a great conversation? Because I listened to the first two from Vancouver, and I'll tell you this: it's a hell of a lot better than the podcast that Harris and Peterson had the first two times around. So they actually made some progress.
I did not finish the first one. I couldn't get through it. I listened to the first half and thought
it was awful.
I got it. I got the idea. Cliff notes are fine.
Yeah. Yeah. They have two very different styles, but it's interesting because I listen to them. I don't think they're actually that far apart in reality.
Yeah.
I like to.
Ever since they started talking, and especially now where they're actually having a conversation, rather than just, let's fight for I'm the Pokemon for my bunch of listeners and followers, let me fight my fight that they want me to fight.
They're actually trying to figure each other out.
Yeah, and I love it now because I really like both of them for entirely different reasons. And it's like we're sitting on the sideline as just, dudes, you guys are fine. Just treat each other like a couple bros. Just get along. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And I would pay with a limb to see Hitchens and Peterson talk, because I would give up a limb for that, I think.
I wonder, it's entirely possible, and I love Hitchens, but it's entirely possible that would be the worst conversation. It could be so unproductive. You just don't know. You don't know what you would get, but, we should pour one out for Hitchens. What I liked about him was that he was just so irreverent. And, we need that in our discourse. We need people that are just really not afraid to tell the truth in a way that he is, yeah.
And he seemed to be almost always friends with the people that he argued with. And it's like, after boxing or MMA, I've noticed that a lot of people are like, let's hug after this. Oh my gosh, that was gold. I see it as kind of the same thing where maybe they.
Are you trying to say that men fighting other men is actually not toxic in every situation?
I suppose not. There's some sort of camaraderie about fighting.
Well, it's respect. Yeah, it's respect and it's integrity because, if people have, there's an interesting parallel you can draw between physical fights and debates, where people don't like, there's rules obviously in a fight. You shouldn't really be committing terrible logical fallacies to try and drive your point home. You don't like sophistry, and we don't like people that kick men in the crotch, and we don't like people that gouge eyes or pull hair. You fight a good fight.
I've never thought of
You
that
know,
parallel.
well, there's rules to debate, right? Just like there is in a fight. And at the end of a fight, even though people have been punching each other in the face and trying to put them into an arm bar or whatever the case may be, typically speaking, even if there was some animosity coming into the fight, sometimes that's engineered and it's dramatized, but sometimes it's actually real. And at the end of it, the respect is there over the course of the discourse itself. It's like, okay, I'm competing with this person, and at the end of it, I'm gonna still, even if I win, I'm gonna win graciously, and if I'm gonna lose, I'm gonna lose graciously, and I'm not gonna make excuses over the loss. Same thing in debates.
Fought Mayweather recently.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good loser. I don't remember his
People
name.
are actually. I hate to cut you off, but just one thought there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ironically, people are actually more gracious in fights than they are in debates. I mean, how many Facebook debates have you ever seen? Statistically.
Now that I think of it,
really, if they've been real battles,
Yeah, have you? Are you a big fan of boxing by chance?
Only spiritually. I don't
shame.
follow a lot of that stuff. I used to watch more MMA, but yeah.
So there's with Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor, they recently fought, and that was kind of just a fun show kind of thing. It wasn't it didn't seem like a real fight, but I've seen.
I
McGregor
did see that
lose.
one. I got sucked into that.
Awesome. I've seen McGregor lose. And he's actually, as you said, a really gracious loser, and he uses it to, it seems, build forward to grow more. Kind of like when you lose an argument. Like, oh shit, I was wrong. This person's right. And now I have to change some of the way that I think. I doubt that Mayweather would be a good loser if his buddy Broner is anything to
We've
show.
never got to see him lose.
Real yeah, but if Broner's quite a lot like him, and if Mayweather is much like his buddy Broner's an awful loser. But even to your point, even with him being quite an awful loser and snarky and kind of crude and rude, I've seen people on Facebook say just horrible things that I think Broner would even go, oh, too far, man.
Oh yeah. Well, part of it's because it's easy to be. It's actually cowardly to a degree to take things to a certain place without any possibility of real world repercussions. And if you give people an avenue to act cowardly, they take it. Whereas if you put someone in person, this is one of the things I love about this, about what you're doing here, is because you can actually talk to people. I mean, you and I have similar views about a lot of things. I'm sure if we wanted to have a debate, we could find something to talk about and have some discourse about it. But yeah, and
Canada sucks.
I know you, so we would argue well even if it was online. Yeah, fuck you. No, I'm just kidding. But for real, I mean, if you look at fighting as a good example, what you actually are witnessing is people carrying out essentially the hero mythology, right? The hero is not the one that wins every single time. It's like you have to learn how to fail and then pick yourself up and move on again. And if you have a fighter who's undefeated and then all of a sudden they lose, and they lose without grace, they get booed. Because what the fighter has done is destroyed the myth of the hero that's built up around that person. People don't really celebrate that person individually because they don't know who that fighter is. What they're celebrating is the spirit of the fighter as such, the spirit of the hero. So when somebody sees someone lose and then accept that gracious defeat and then say, I'm going to do better next time, the crowd is still behind them because we need something to believe in, right?
I could think of some exact examples
Yeah.
of that. So
You don't
with
get that
Broner
online.
being a loser, with Broner being a pretty sore loser, he constantly gets booed. It's almost like it's a show for him that this is what I do
He's
to
not
get
a hero.
popularity. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how am I forgetting this
Why do
guy?
people love Frankie Edgar? You remember
I don't know.
Frankie Edgar from MMA
No,
and
I
UFC?
don't.
He used to get his ass. I mean, he used to narrowly win every one of his fights. Right? It'd be decision
Sure.
most of the time. The guy would get his ass kicked. You know, why do people love Rocky?
Yeah.
Even though it was fake, right?
Pacquiao has lost, and
Mhm.
he's always been super gracious with those. And yeah, people usually say,
Yeah.
like, argue he won that fight afterwards, and nobody's like,
Mhm.
guy's a dick, fuck him.
Yeah.
I have never heard anybody say that except for when they find out about his opinion on homosexuality.
I didn't hear about that, so you're gonna ruin the hero myth of Pacquiao for me now, probably.
Oh yeah, Google that. He
If I find out Pacquiao's a homophobe, that'll probably not sit very well with me, but. Yeah.
then Daniel in the stands goes, woo woo! Oh, he's a homophobe. Boo! Guy's a dick!
You could turn on it like that, but I mean, the thing is
Well, yeah.
you know what I'm saying is kind of true here. It's like,
Well, yeah, so that intellectual parallel where you're arguing with somebody, I don't remember who's been saying it, but I think a lot of people have. It's when you come to a real true disagreement, it's either someone dictates down and becomes the tyrannical kind of person, the other person bows and becomes a slave type thing, or
mhm.
you physically fight and kill the other person, and now you get to be the winner. The new option is put your ideas forward and let your ideas die rather than yourself, which
That's
is like the fighting.
that's the abstract of what you're actually doing psychologically. Is that, I mean, people identify with the fact that we're all imperfect and that we're mortal and that we're all very flawed. So when we see other people have some humility, even though we know they're very talented, I mean, it could be someone conceding a point in a debate if you know that they're really a very, very intelligent person. You've heard about this this is one of the things that people love about science, right? People don't usually get too personally attached to their theories, but occasionally they do, and then somebody will come along and they will prove a theory wrong. And I think it was Dawkins that told the story, and I don't remember exactly the context or who was involved, but somebody in front of a fairly decent room of people had actually thanked another man for proving his theory wrong.
Boner.
Which is
Boner right
okay,
there. Intellectual boner.
Well, it's the hero. Like, you're a fucking hero because you value the truth more than yourself. And if you're willing to, I guess, sacrifice something in order for the greater good, like that's what people actually resonate with. It's like, and we like to see the vulnerability because we know we're all imperfect, and if we see
They're
that,
human.
if we
I'm
see,
human.
yeah, we see ourselves in the hero, right? Then, we love that, and we do need more of that in our discourse. It's people should be able to just disagree. But deeper than that, I think a higher goal would actually be to sometimes admit, hey, you're wrong or whatever. And that's not always easy to do. Like sometimes I will say to people, like I'll edit a post and say, oh, I corrected that just because I knew it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And, I don't want misinformation going out there or whatever the case may be. But, I'm not perfect in this. Yeah.
You said that much earlier on where your ideas kind of die or something like that. And when I was mentioning my notes over there, like you look back and that person's or that idea is dead now. Like some part of you's gone about that, which is fine. And there's been quite a few times in class, like I don't know everything about the thing that I teach. I don't.
Mhm.
Every once in a while I'm wrong, or someone asks a question and I don't know, and then they show me a better way kind of thing. And it's, I don't know if they like this or not, but I laugh. Oh, shit. That shut me up real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. But
it's good to be proven wrong because that's how you learn. I mean, or at least it's certainly how you build wisdom, because you have to learn to let certain things die, so to speak. That's metaphor, but it's kind of true psychologically. Like if you think about who you were when you were a 5-year-old boy, you might have your memories of who you were, but that person as such is fundamentally dead. I mean, there's not very much left of you from when you were 5 to when you are now. You know, you have the fond
even
memories.
the skin cells
Hopefully
and the
they're
blood
fond.
cells and things, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, and who knows? Maybe someday somebody will actually get that down to a cellular level, and they'll tell you, "Oh, this determines this and whatever." And you know, that would be for me, by the way, that would be the real nail in the coffin for the free will debate. But I don't want to open up that can of worms right now.
Oh man, there it is. There's the part that we could talk about. I think I've seen you mention that a few times now that I think of it. Yeah.
I've wrestled with that dirty cocksucker a lot this last year.
I think my buddy Nathan and I when I was back and still religious, and I start learning about how cosmology works and how evolution works, and I'm like, yeah, dude, you can lead back this whole thing. And we've ran simulations in SolidWorks, and you run the simulation with these certain variables, you put it through the thing, and out pops the result. And as long as everything stays the same and has the same input, the output's essentially always the same. And so this is before I knew anything about. Well, I still don't know anything about. Oh god, physics. Oh god, quantum physics. No idea. No clue. Don't even know anything. But that's the only thing recently that has put any dent into me on the free will side, because I kept thinking, well, if
it's just
you
purely
put in the same variables, you keep getting the same output. And so if you keep going back, keep moving forward, the inputs are all still the same from the beginning. So I've always wondered, how does it not show up the same? And then quantum mechanics, what little I know about it is like, oh, I might be wrong. Crap, I better start working to do good again.
This is a very weak argument I'm going to make. But I think that there are certain properties that just don't exist on a particle level. So trying to go smaller and smaller doesn't really answer the questions fundamentally. I mean, you might say
there's some things we can't measure and have no idea about. We have no idea how something works. Who fucking knows?
Well, if you take your subjective experience, like say with something like an emotion, which we don't really fully understand those things, but say sadness, right? People know what it means to be sad. And you couldn't exactly say that sadness isn't real, because the subjective exists within the cosmos. I mean, you wouldn't be able to say that your dreams are not real in the sense that they actually don't exist. It's like, no, they exist. You experience them.
Yeah.
Therefore, they are objectively real, but they're subjectively experienced. So if you can experience an emotion, but there's no such thing as a particle that holds the property of sadness, how can you use quantum mechanics to prove that free will doesn't exist? I still end up at these,
It may not be an individual particle that affects this specific emotion, but it is, as far as I'm aware, like you input specific chemicals. Like you could theoretically come up with a drug like Soma that would force someone to be happy or sad with these specific chemical inputs. And there's a chapter in Sapiens. You should get the book. It's a good.
I have it. I just haven't read it. So
there's a chapter in Sapiens where it starts talking about happiness as a philosophy, where some philosophies see happiness as all right, this is it. This is a good. Aim for happiness as best as you can for the largest amount. And then there's some that are like, your subjective happiness is unimportant compared to the rest of what's the moral good kind of thing. And then it kind of touches that a little bit, and then it compares happiness from one person to another, because as you say, it's subjective, and some people are just generally disposed to be more happy than others.
It's a personality trait on some level, yeah.
Yeah, and if you copy and paste Neil or Daniel, let's say, into North Korea, and I've read a few things from people that have escaped, and apparently dragonflies are like the piece de resistance, where that's the shit. Capture a dragonfly. So I've thought about this when I read that chapter, because it was mind-blowing to me, where, let's say I worked hard for a few hours, and someone gave me a slice of pizza, I helped my buddy move. And I'm happy that chemical input, granted, it's from an external source inducing that chemical input that makes Neil happy, where that wasn't too bad, helping somebody move. Meanwhile, Neil, copied into North Korea, chases down this dragonfly, works hard to get it, eats this dragonfly, big fat meaty motherfucker, stoked as balls. And I'm really happy about this because it's the same exact chemical input, plus or minus, but let's just say it is. And that copy-paste Neil is just as subjectively happy with totally different inputs from the external world. No idea. I have no idea what to do with that. And then some people are just more happy than others. So if you say you have a 0 to 10 scale of the most happy and the least happy, and some people have a default setting of, let's say, 5, and they just have a minimum, let's say, and it's more or less you can hit these on a regular basis, or even in the worst situations you get. And then some people have a different plus or minus in it, and then you just normalize, because it's really easy to get normalized to a new situation if it becomes relatively constant, especially if it's a good one. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to do with that. I have no clue what to do with that. That's new information to me, and I'm broken for a while. I still don't know what to do with that.
Well, cheers to you for being humble on it, because I don't know what the hell to do about any of this stuff either. And I think part of it, I like to think about it a lot, because it's totally beyond and definitely at the limits of my intellect. I mean, when just a little bit anecdote, but like, I had an experience a few years back where my dad became sort of mentally ill. And I was actually reading, it was Sam Harris's book on free will. I read the book kind of shortly after. Mm-hmm. And it actually helped me, in a way, come to terms with it. I was like, I can't understand these sort of insane thoughts that my father was having. And he was physically incapable of having rational thoughts, and I'm physically incapable of having the insane thought processes that he was going through. I mean, it's certainly, like, the arguments against free will are staggeringly powerful. And one thing I am settled on this is that we don't have true unconstrained free will. I mean, that's just a fairy tale. But on that note, though, I have to say what's interesting about, my atheism, I don't know how you came to yours exactly. If it was you got rid of free will because you used to believe in it, presumably, when you were more religious, and that as you got involved in the...
Free will did not come till later. It was cosmology. It was cosmology and evolution. It was Sagan and Dawkins, and then Hitchens just came by and just nail in the coffin. It's like,
he destroyed anything that was left. Well, did you ever have a thought?
Not a once.
When you never thought about free will when you lost your faith.
Oh no, that was a joke. You said, "Have you ever had a thought?" And I said no.
Never. I'm a virgin. Yeah, I'm still a virgin. Yeah.
Yeah. This experience is totally new. You're popping that cherry hard.
Damn. Yeah. But you never thought about free will when you were challenging your faith, so to speak.
I think it was starting to work in parallel. When I started learning about cosmology and then evolution. And I think I was also curiously looking into the brain to some extent. Like, you can put in a certain chip. I've never been more jealous of a chimpanzee before. I think it's no, it's some monkey. They put a chip in the monkey's brain, and it would read. I'll have to find the article. It would read the brain inputs and copy it to a robotic arm. So when she moved her arm, the robotic arm moved. And oh damn, this is. Anyway, the long story short, the monkey has a third arm now, and it's robotic, and it can operate from anywhere. And I'm jealous of a monkey.
Right.
But yeah, the answer is yes. I did start thinking about free will along the same time as I started learning about cosmology and evolution.
Did you, more specifically, when you were religious, did you believe in free will?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, part of the Christian myth was certainly that God gave people free will, and that's why we see, a lot of the terrible shit in the world is because of that. But of course, you couldn't also have love without free will.
You can't really have a whole lot from a religious perspective without it.
Let me clarify. Love is just a chemical in the brain without free will. That's the kicker.
Do you mean
see,
agape
I'm a romantic.
love? Do you mean
Pardon?
agape love, or oh god, there's English is so bad with that word.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I don't know exactly what I mean on it, but I'll put it to you this way.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm a romantic, right? And I believe in love. So when I was about 14 years old, and when I never really quite believed in God. I had prayed. My prayer came true, by the way. So I could post hoc explain that, but it was obviously bullshit. But anyway, but when I was about 14, I really put the nail in the coffin on religion for me, because you see, I knew that I didn't read the Bible. I didn't know that God necessarily said, oh, there is free will, or that was the Christian idea. But I actually believed in free will because I believed in love. And the reason why I rejected religion is because there's a paradox, you see. If you have a God and you ascribe to God the classical attributes of God, that they are omniscient, okay, that's no limits on knowledge, which means they technically know everything in the past as well as everything in the future, which forcibly makes your choices of will to be completely an illusion. So it wouldn't have mattered to me if Scripture had said God gave you free will. I mean, it does, but I didn't know that. It wouldn't have changed the way I viewed it, because I said, well, the argument for me that irritated me was I was trying to figure out morality back then. People always said, well, how can you be a moral person without belief in God? Because then you would have no free will. And I said, how can you believe in free will if you believe in an omniscient God? And if you get your morality only from free will, then I thought that, well, those two things are just not compatible. So I disbelieved in God because I actually thought that free will was more important. And it's a really bizarre way to come to it, because a lot of people philosophize the exact opposite way. Yeah.
That's not bizarre at all. I remember asking that specific question to my priest, where it was, same logic. He's omniscient. If I do the wrong things, I go to hell or heaven, and he knows the results. So why if someone is damned to hell, he chose to let it happen, kind of thing. Let's say.
Right.
And
he knew you were going to sin and go to hell. Yeah.
That drove me absolutely nuts when I was a kid. And I ask, well, how can we have free will with an omniscient God that knows the beginning and the end? Well, he gave us free will. So he shouldn't know the future if we have free will, but he knows the future. I don't remember what they said to me. They used some analogy that I'm sure now would just sound like utter bullshit to me. But I don't remember what it was. I wasn't exactly happy with it then, but I bought it. I think a lot of people have that thought. I think you just came to it earlier by that same method.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I'm sure that I didn't come to it completely on my own, but people are influenced by all sorts of things. But I just think well, my note, and I think why I even brought it up, is that it was funny that I came to atheism because I believed in free will, and I believed that I would be a more moral person by holding on to my free will, because I couldn't keep both.
I see
and
where
believe
you're going
in
with
God.
this now.
And yet, after all those years, Sam Harris tried to fucking destroy my belief in free will.
And give you God back. Like, dude,
that son of a bitch.
You've argued for atheism for so long, and now you're giving me this thing that was the crux that made me leave it? You know what this means if I have this back.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I mean, I have nothing but respect for Sam and his intellect, but I do think it's kind of ironic that it was almost like a test of my atheism to find out that I had no bloody free will. I said, well, if I have no free will, then everything's determined. Maybe there's a God. I don't know.
So how are you handling that? Like, okay, now let's say there isn't free will, what then do you think would your argument be?
I still believe
a God.
I should say I'm agnostic about will. I know it's not free, but I believe, or I'm inclined to believe, or biased to believe, that there is some sort of limited bandwidth for will. It's kind of random and constrained, and like hyper constrained. Yeah. But you see, there's this old question. If God is omniscient, okay, if you take the classical attributes again, if God is omniscient, he knows everything, and he's all powerful, what is the one thing that God lacks? And most people would say, well, nothing, because he can do everything and whatever, but it's like, that's actually not true, because he lacks limitation.
Wait. I was gonna say something along the lines of, that sounds like he's a slave. Like, he has no choice. Knows everything. It almost sounds like he doesn't have free will if he's locked into this and there's nothing unknown. It's actually you are a slave to
the paradox
everything.
You're in theory, if you have, for instance, if you don't have to experience hunger or death or anything like that, you have maximum freedom. You just can't express it because there's nothing for you to do.
Wouldn't you just become numb?
You would just do nothing. And the weird thing about humanity is that we're hyper constrained. But we would have
awful timing.
If you took it,
we're down to 1:30.
Okay.
Again.
We'll kick this up again.
We will resume this. Because we're both dumb on this. I'm excited.
We are. We can just stumble around in our ignorance, and people can probably blast us about why we're just ignorant assholes when we post this up later. Yeah.
I'm excited. And I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah. All right. I'll stop it now. And we'll resume in a few minutes.